Hello, welcome to our Q&A for Derek DelGaudio's In and of Itself. My name is Chris Lemaire and I'm a programmer at the American Cinematheque. And I'm so thrilled to present this conversation between the writer and star of the film, Derek DelGaudio, and our special guest moderator, Neil Patrick Harris. Before we jump in, I just want to send a thank you to Hulu for making this event possible. If you haven't seen the film yet, it's streaming on Hulu now. I also, of course, want to thank our American Cinematheque members that are tuning in just for all your continued support. The following conversation originally premiered at the Aero Theatre in Santa Monica following a screening of the film. So thanks for watching and please enjoy.
Hey there, everyone. My name is Neil Patrick Harris. Thank you for coming and joining, being a part of this American Cinematheque event. It is the 15th of June, a Star Walt day, for it is my 48th birthday today, but I chose to spend my time instead of, at a strip club. I don't know. I thought it would be better to moderate this panel for my great good friend, Derek DelGaudio, to talk about what you have just seen in and of itself, the amazing film on Hulu. And so before I introduce Derek, let me just take 2 minutes to explain my pathway into magic. I perform and I host a fair amount, but I spend an extraordinary amount of my own time thinking and caring about magic. It's been my hobby since I was a little kid. Went to a shopping mall in Albuquerque, New Mexico, went to a magic shop, fell in love, have loved it and been championing it ever since. Same time I started acting, so magic never, thankfully, became something that I needed to achieve or aspire to do for commerce. It was just something that I loved. And my love of magic has carried me into becoming a junior member at the Magic Castle, which is a private club in Los Angeles. I then I got on the board of directors, became the president of the Magic Castle for 3 years. And while I was there, I heard a lot about this gentleman, Derek DelGaudio. He was this kind of cagey dude that would sort of stand in corners and like observe, but not really engage, which when in the world of magic is unique because most magicians go out of their way to present themselves and to be noticed. So I was kind of intrigued by that. Then he and another gentleman named Helder Guimaraes decided to do a 2-person show downstairs in the Aero Theatre, and they called it Nothing to Hide. And I started hearing from everyone at the castle when I was there that you have to see this, it's amazing. Then I said, yeah, great, I like magic, but I got to deal with paperwork. And then they said, and then all of a sudden there was like becoming a big deal, and people were lining up for 3-4 hours to see the show. And then Siegfried was coming from Vegas to see the show. And then suddenly everyone was needing to see the show. So I went and saw it. It was unbelievable. I said, we have to have more people see this than the people at the Magic Castle, private club, small venue. So I reached out to my friend Randy Arney, who was, God rest his soul, who was then in charge of the Geffen Playhouse. And Randy came and saw the show, loved it. Right after he saw it, talked to Derek and Helder and said, let's do it at the Geffen. And so then I wound up directing that show. We did it at the Geffen to great success. They kept selling out. It was super fun. I became really close friends with Derek. The show got transferred to New York. And then after that, what was next was In and of Itself. So that's why I'm here, because I actually have a friendship with him. He's a writer, he's a storyteller, he's a performer, he's a speaker of truths, he's a loving husband. He's one of the most dedicated and authentic people I have ever met. He is an author of the outstanding book, A Moral Man, which is the best book that I have read this year. And if you have enjoyed what you have seen on film with In and of Itself, you should definitely get it because it's a compendium that is phenomenal. Anyway, Derek, welcome to this. That's my backstory.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Neil.
Congratulations on the run of In and of Itself and for the wild success of its transfer to film. It ran for 72 weeks. You did 560 shows. And I was a producer on the at the off-Broadway version of it. So I got to witness firsthand the process of you doing it. And I think it comes across well in film that you are really present and authentically invested in the show. But it's on film, right? So people who have just seen the film may think that you're just a good actor. Can you speak a little bit to how the performance evolved from the beginning to the end, and how your take kind of on authenticity?
Sure. The show was, there were a few levels in which the show had to function. One was the technical level in which I had to achieve things. Things had to happen in real time. And then there's the emotional narrative that's running throughout the show. And when I first did the performance early on, it was like riding a bicycle while trying to build it at the same time. And it was very difficult to have the performative aspect be as present as I would like, because I was thinking a lot. There was a lot of effort in what I was doing on stage. And so it took a while for me to get the show in my bones to the point where I could let it go and really be present for every single performance. And as time went on, the more I did it, the more present I was able to become over the run. And so that was a very fortunate thing that I got to do it long enough so that I actually got to take it to the place that I had hoped it would always get to.
At what point did that happen? Like a month in?
No, it was probably in New York. It was probably 3 months in. I started to feel like I was able to let go of everything and just be present, not have to think so much and just be there with the people. And that's what allowed it to become something else. I don't know what that something else is, but that's when I started to feel like it was becoming more than just a show.
Because you're able to be two things simultaneously. And it's something that I admire about you so deeply, is that you know that you want to create a scripted, a set thing.
Yeah.
And at the same time, what you design is something that's nebulous, that changes, that's always different. So is that just part of who you are? Is that you like to test the limits of the two? Because for 3 months in, to do a show where you know kind of that it's set, but you have created pieces within it that require radical different conclusions, right? Giving someone a book, having someone read something that they wrote that they don't know what it is, a letter that arrives for people. You don't know if they're going to be glib or if they're going to like drop and start wailing. So how has that come into your design of the show?
Well, I've never, as you know, I've never had an act. Most performers, magicians especially, develop an act, something that they can hold on to and do at a moment's notice. And for better or worse, I never had that. For worse, often, but but it forced me to create new things at any given moment, and also to always be looking forward as opposed to relying on the tools that I may have collected on the way. But for this, it was more in the design of the experience, in the sense that I knew in order for me to say that I am the Ruletista, in order for me to make that an honest claim, I had to actually, or at least metaphorically, load some chambers. There had to be a high wire act of some type. And if I knew every word that I was going to say or that would be said on that stage, and if I knew every action that was going to happen, that wouldn't, to me, it wouldn't have been honest when I said I am the Ruletista, because there is some uncertainty in that narrative, or there's a lot of uncertainty in that narrative. And I felt I needed to live that, and I needed to create authentic moments of uncertainty for myself, so that by the end of the performance, when I said I am the Ruletista, it could be true. And so it was engineered into the work in that sense.
I got to watch people's reactions afterwards, and the I am moment at the end, the who am I cards, and picking their individual ideas of who they were at that
Mhm.
particular show.
Mhm.
It felt like church for people.
Yeah.
How was that experience for you on your end? Like it almost felt like you were anointing people with truths that they wanted to hear.
It did it did have that effect. It it was um, it was a responsibility. I felt a great deal of responsibility in my hands with that, and knowing, and it also took a toll on me emotionally because I realized we created a theatrical circumstance in which we could have people feel comfortable enough or give them permission to live truths before our eyes and to reveal truths, um, uh, and and I could just tell how much people don't feel seen, and
Hmm.
that weight, like, never lessened over all the shows. I always just felt this weight of people's, the moment before I would say it, I would see it in their eyes of the wanting, the needing to be seen, and so I
Wow.
felt a great deal of responsibility in in that, and getting it right was important, and um, having it be not a revelation of some sort of effect, but an acknowledgement of someone's existence, and those two things are different. And I had to make sure that I was always erring on the side of an acknowledgement and being generous with it, rather than being performative and getting, trying to get credit for a thing.
For sure. And I can speak with authenticity that it took its toll on you. When you say it took its toll emotionally, it took its toll physically on you. I mean, I am one to speak about magic a lot because I love it, but I'm also very vocal in speaking about how mundane and often just gross magic can be,
Sure.
because you have magicians who go out of their way to show an audience just how challenging their effect was.
Right.
Yeah, breathing for air, Michael Flatley style, they're just like, I got out of the chains right before the buzz this almost cut me in half. At the same time, that's totally
Yeah.
fictionalized and made up. And I appreciate the dramatics of that type of magic. But how do you differentiate yourself? Because you are authentically doing those things. Like the toll that it took on you was not subterfuge. It wasn't like an air that you're putting on. Is that important to you? Can you speak a little bit about what, like, your truths in magic and performing?
I'm still I don't know enough yet to know how I feel about it in terms of like a career sense, or like, I don't know if I need everything to be hard,
Hmm.
or so true. Like, I do believe in theater, and I do believe in creating, creating truth through a fiction, but I did choose the hard path with this experience because I felt like you couldn't fake it. I felt like you couldn't, and I felt like they would feel it if you faked this, because the content or the subject matter, the theme of identity is such a dicey one, that I felt like
Mm.
everything had to be, uh, at least true, if not right. It had to be true, and so I did feel that responsibility of, if I'm gonna, especially being especially being a straight white guy, was another added element
How
of,
do you mean?
well, I'm doing a show about identity and what it means to be and be seen, and I'm, in an archetypal sense, I'm the last person who should be talking about that right now.
Interesting.
However, it's a universe. The themes that I was exploring were beyond the traditional dialogue that's happening with identity politics right now, and more existential questions, and what it means to be human, things that transcend race or sex, just questions we all have about who we are in this world. So I just felt again a responsibility to handle these things with care, and the very least I could do was be honest about it, especially when dealing with a deceptive practice, or something that's perceived as a deceptive practice. Having the title of magician attached to my name changes what the performance is for people. If it was a one-man show of just some actor, the whole experience would have been different. but because people knew me as a magician, or at least it said it in the bio, people had different expectations, and having those expectations is part of what makes the work possible. If I said, I always said, if I was a mailman and handed you a letter and said it's from your uncle, wouldn't be much of an effect there. It would just be, I'm doing my job. But because of the context and because of who I am or who you think I am, it makes the truth that I tell seem they're altered in some way, or they're distorted by your lens of seeing me as a magician. So I was just very careful to be honest about as much as I could, knowing that there were elements of it that would be perceived as deceptive.
Would you prefer to be performing, being known as a magician, and then changing expectations after they think you're a magician and then see that you're a storyteller? Or would you rather be known as a storyteller and then they realize, wait, you're doing magical things within that construct?
You know, both. So, I mean, you and I have talked about these things before. They both have their pros and cons, and it really comes down to whatever label you're going to have. It's going to do something to the work, and you know, people have known you as a storyteller, and then when you do something magical, it's like, oh, Neil also does magic, and it's like it can be reductive of your actual investment in being a magician over the years and actually being a magician. And so, you know, the other side of it is they don't expect a magician to say truthful things or be a good performer or say something meaningful. And so either side has its own pros and cons. I'm trying to erase both at the same time and just be present with them and do what I do and hope that the work and the experience that we create speaks for itself. It never does, but that's the goal.
Well, I think if anyone's going to do it, it's you, because by having a wall filled with I am cards, you are eliminating labels, or at least you're shining a spotlight on the ability to have labels not be so heavy.
Sure.
And such a part of it. And truth is a very important part of who you are. It's what you write about in your book.
Yeah.
It's what you speak about when you're on stage. And there are very fewer truthful people that I've ever met than Frank Oz. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with Frank, how he joined the project, and his involvement, and sort of how that came to be?
Sure. I met Frank while we were doing Nothing to Hide. Our mutual friend Andy Nyman told Frank, "You got to go see this show a friend of mine is doing in New York." And afterwards, Frank introduced himself, and we just hit it off over some drinks. We were talking, and there was kind of a kinship of he's known as a puppeteer, and that's kind of, even though he's gone on to do other things with his life, he still feels like that is the title that he's strapped with. And no matter what he does or what movie he directs, he's just a puppeteer. And even in doing the character, creating the characters that he's created, like he's known as the voice of Yoda. And there's so much, as you know, there's so much more to bringing a piece of fabric or rubber to life than just being a voice. It's similar to magic in that sense, in that the effort is so hidden from and concealed from the viewer that they kind of have no way to really truly appreciate the craft other than to lose themselves in whatever the fiction is. But the character or the human behind it kind of vanishes, the way that the secrets behind a curtain vanish. They just don't get the credit that, like, the magician always wants more credit than he gets. That's why he's doing the Michael Flatley thing, is because the other stuff he can't reveal would destroy the thing he's trying to create. And puppeteering is the same thing. As soon as you see the arm, you know, game over. And so we hit it off, and I ended up thinking about what this show was, and it was about being more than one thing and being strapped down by a label and things like that. And the conversations that I had with Frank reflected what the work I was doing. And there was also another element where it was really highfalutin, artsy crap that I was putting into the show, and I needed something to balance that. And I thought, what's more accessible than the Muppets? what's more accessible than
Hmm.
than Miss Piggy and Yoda, and someone who could, Little Shop of Horrors. And so Frank just seemed like the person who could balance that and push back on all of the pretentious stuff, what could be perceived as pretentious and highfalutin and artsy. I, I I wanted to balance that, knowing that I'm trying to talk about real ideas that mean something to me and I believe are worth talking about, but making them accessible for everyone so that they can enter them and experience them and enjoy them, and not just have them be a nice idea that someone may think about or not. So he seemed like the right guy, and he agreed to help, and we just started collaborating back and forth on computers and phone calls, and then he would fly to LA and help, and it just kind of took off from there. And yeah, he's all he did was keep me honest. I told him from the beginning what I wanted, and anytime I started to veer off from that, he would correct course or just tell me this is not what you said you wanted to do. And it was hard because I veered off a lot and tried things that just didn't work, and it would just feel like a thing that I didn't want, but he would be outside of me telling me this is the direction you said you didn't want to go, and so I'd have to back up again and start over.
It's hard in the theater too, because it becomes very repetitive.
Yeah.
You have 6 shows that are killer shows and the crowd goes nuts, and then you have the 7th show where you pretty much think you're doing the same thing and they're pretty quiet and tepid, and it's like, and then you're thinking in your own head, like, was it me? Did I do something wrong? Is it them? And it's kind of alchemy. It just kind of is what it is. But I think Frank is the most amazing person and the greatest collaborator for you, especially on this piece.
Yeah.
He was there almost every show, like in New York.
There all the time. He was there. I mean, we did the show for almost 2 years, and 2 weeks before we closed, 2 weeks before closing night, he gave me notes. He was just we were always changing things. The crew was eventually they got used to it, but we would he it was alive, and he someone who comes from a live theater background. We don't think of it that way, but they were live performers who would do live shows on live TV all the time, and that's what he lives for. And he hadn't done that since he was a teenager with Jim, and so he really, it was like revisiting his the glory years in a sense. And anytime we did something that was resembled something that we had seen before, we pull it back and try a different path.
What a trip. But that almost makes it its own magic, that because you didn't dictate that, and most directors don't do that. And just the fact that you two had such connection and were able to keep each other honest, and that he was invested in the show, and not in a mean way, in a very parental way.
Very loving. Yeah, it was generosity and trust, and a lot of just trust between us on both sides of it.
So you have that where it's always changing. How then do you say, let's film it so it will never change? So like, what was that process?
That was a whole different thing. There was a point where I knew I could end the show. I walked backstage and I literally was like, we can end it. And everyone wondered why, because excuse me. I just realized we had said what we wanted to say. I felt like I had communicated what I came to communicate. I was fighting for legibility the entire time. From the moment I had the idea, I had basically what the show was on paper, in a sense, and it's what I pitched Frank in his living room when I first told him what I wanted to do. But it was nebulous. It was in me and it was in my head and my heart, but it wasn't there for people to see. Then it became about putting it outside myself to let them see what I'm talking about. And then I would just look at them, and every night I got to see them, and I just saw that they were understanding it in the way that I wanted, and I didn't want it to go past that point. I didn't. They got it, and it doesn't mean they understand what the hell I'm talking about necessarily, but they just I felt like I said what I wanted to say as clearly as I could ever say it. And now we're just repeating that,
Hmm.
and it's going to become something else. And so I decided it's okay to stop it now. We've done what we wanted to do. And as soon as I decided that, I decided we should preserve this. I should try to preserve this because I felt like it's worth it. So I just started filming it for myself, basically, like to capture what's happening in the room with little expectations of what would come of that. And then when and I asked Frank, like, do you think there's a film here, like a special or something? He said he didn't really think so. He wasn't sure that there was
Hmm.
that was, he didn't have a vision for it. And he had and from experience, live performances don't translate well. So I kept pursuing it just for myself, basically, with no expectations. And then eventually, knowing it was going to end, I was just seeing the people night after night. I felt like it was really worth it. And so I just figured it out and made it happen. But it was very stressful because I was doing the show at the same time, and I was very alone in it because no one really thought that it should be made. No one, every network turned it down. All of the studios and things didn't want it. Even if they liked the show, they just didn't really get what we were, how it could be translated. And I just trusted that it could, and kept going, and eventually it did, which is nice.
So nice. And I'm part of that team.
Yeah.
I would have advised you against it,
Yeah.
because there was something so magical about being there when it was happening, right? And then how do you do that individually?
Yeah, and you were right. I mean, everyone was. I was just naive enough to, like, looking back, I'm like, I don't know that I would have made the same choice, because it kind of is counter to what we know and what we expect. And it was really just brute force making it work because it had to. Like I don't.
Well,
it's kind of miraculous that it worked.
and it worked so miraculously because it's probably the best magic ever transferred from stage to screen, because it represented the actual show incredibly well.
Yeah.
It didn't diverge from it outside of a couple different, like cinematic areas, but more so it allowed an audience that watches it one time to sort of be a fly on the wall and see the multitudes of people and the multitudes of the experience. Who was that something that you had always hoped would happen, or was that something that you developed after, through the edit, you thought, oh wait, why don't we add a bunch of letter reading and a bunch of book reading?
No, that was one of the few ideas that was there early on. There were 3 or 4 ideas that were what we just kind of knew from the beginning. One was multiple nights, multiple the same event with multiple people, because for me it was one show. The book I send out every night. For me, I wanted to take an identity, in this case the identity of an experience in a show, and break it in as many different ways as possible. Break it temporally by sending things out of the theater so the space is not defined, or temporally in terms of time, spatially, so that things leave the theater and that space is not defined. And I knew that it was one show the whole time because of that book. And as long as that book was out in the world and come back, the show never really ended. At least not for one person, kept it alive every single night. So all of the shows were one show, really, conceptually, for me. And so I knew I wanted to show that in a way. And the only way to do that is to show multiple versions of the same event happening over and over again. So that was one of them. And I knew that we'd need to supplement it with some sort of visual help, like animation and archival footage of some type. I wasn't sure if it'd be home footage, because I didn't even know if I had any when I started the process. But I knew that just a guy talking on stage wouldn't really be enough to sustain the full, 75 minutes.
So do you still have all the books?
The book, yeah, one big giant.
Is it one big book?
It's this big. Yeah, it's too big. It's too big. The binding is cracking. It's very, very large and hard to look at, and certainly hard to read, because it's all over the place. It's like a Madden, because it's so many different minds have made this thing. but also like it was alive. It was so wonderful to have it be out there and have that leap of faith taken every single night, that like having it now is evidence of leaps of faith. Not
Hmm.
so there's a bit of a bittersweetness of having it, because it's like, well, it's done now. It's not active the way it used to be.
Oh, but it's so active in so many ways
Well, it's
because,
magical.
right? I don't believe in, I'm not a big spiritually person, but I do believe that in that specific context, those individual people, aside from people who are just trying to be nuts and be stupid
Yeah,
and silly, like actually put some of themselves into what they were writing. And that act of doing so is kind of special.
it's so special. And it was another thing, along the lines of people wanting to be seen, is how much people have in them that they're just never given the opportunity to reveal it. And there would be nights, multiple nights, like a week usually, where someone would say something just beautiful and profound and lovely or poetic or funny. And afterwards I'd ask them, like, are you a writer, or are you a poet, or what? They're like, no, I'm an accountant, or no, I'm a stay-at-home dad, or whatever. And they just,
Wow.
they it was an avenue for them to to reveal a part of themselves that they don't get to reveal to the world. And it was really special to be witness to that live, and to have evidence of people's remarkable creativity.
So, so given that people aren't labels and are want to be seen, and your job has been one of magic where most people want to be seen, and yet you as a person, it seems, are reticent and reluctant to want to be seen a lot. Here you are on this trajectory to be seen a lot and to make change. What is your, I won't ask like what's your end game, but like where do you see your path going, seeing as you've really broken the boundaries of what a magic show can be, of what a performance piece can be? Do you want to keep growing larger, or do you want to change and do different, now you've written a book. So
Yeah.
what's the future hold?
uh i'm I'm trying to give myself permission to be open to what I could be, and um not try to impose my own limitations on what I think I should do next, based on what traditional paths have been like.
Right, because success sort of implies that you then need to do something bigger and something more and get your own show and then have the show.
Yeah,
Like, I'm curious.
yeah. I mean, um, we've talked about these things before. I struggle with trying to navigate the outside uh, world, what it comes to me with, and trying to know if that's something I should do, because it seems like the obvious choice. Like, you should have a TV show, or you should do this, or you should do that. I guess I'm just working very hard at trying to stay true to the work that that matters to me, that I really want to put into the world or help others put into the world. Being open to collaborations still, not and being either the guy behind the guy, or
Hmm.
a guy on stage, or a guy amongst many people. Being open to all versions of it, or not feeling the need to be on stage at all. I'm really trying to do my best to look inside to see what story I need to tell next, and what story keeps coming. Listening to the stories that keep emerging in my head, the repetitive, like the Rulatista just was something that kept coming to me, it kept coming up in my life, in my head. That story, I would tell friends that story, and I didn't know what to do with it, but I knew I had to honor that, and somehow do whatever it was telling me to do. I had to listen. And so I'm just working hard at listening to whatever is silencing the noises, and listening to what the next thing that is inside deep down telling me what I should do next. But I've heard whispers, but nothing definitive.
There's no new Rulatista story that you had that's like chewing at you that you need to tell people? Not
I
right now, I'm saying, but just in
No,
general.
you're right. No, I mean, but it was just, I went straight from doing the show to editing the film for a year with Frank, and then writing the book in the pandemic, and then
Wow.
both of them came out at the same time. And as you know, that's like a whole nother, that's what this is. And as fun as this is, it is work. Like it's talking about the work is a form of work, and until that dies down, it's hard to allow the space for the other things to come in.
Yeah, true. You need a little time
Just a
to
little
just sort
time.
of
Yeah.
sit and ponder it.
Yeah.
I just love having watched you and watching your sort of brilliant ascension in a direction that isn't straight up
Hmm.
has been an honor.
Uh-huh.
And to know that you're the guy who, you know, worked at a magic shop in Colorado that wanted to learn to do magic that people wouldn't notice, as opposed to learn to do magic that people did notice.
Hmm.
To see you get the acclaim and the you know, Magic Castle Magician of the Year, and to be doing like Emmy campaigns for a show that has legitimately moved and affected so many people. I'm deeply proud of you, and
Oh,
I think, and I just don't feel like it goes to your head in a weird way. You're so calm and chill about all of it.
well, I'm surrounded
Congratulations,
by,
man.
you know, the people I'm surrounded by. They don't tolerate that. You know, they
That's
and
true.
and also, like, you and I have talked about this. I asked you a long time ago how, you know, how you're not messed up from having so much success and so many different variations in your life, and you told me it was because of the people that were your parents and the people around you who helped you, who keep your head on straight. So I'm very fortunate. You've been one of those people who have both supported me, but also put things into perspective so that it doesn't, put it into context and see how these things come and go, and how and I spend most of my days trying to understand what's real and what's true, and so you know, the relationships that we have, and these little things that we all agree on and feel deep down inside are the things that I care about, and so I try to focus on those.
Yeah. And it makes for a frightening friendship at times, because you
Yeah.
you have surrounded yourself from the time when you were a kid with people who were experts at their field, right? And you have had to prove yourself to these people
Yeah.
through, you know, trauma and through nervousness, and but mostly through dedication. And you have an amazing group of people that are around you that are really, really skilled at what they do. Um, and so I'm this dude that's like a magic aficionado, but I'm, you know, my second deals suck. And so I'm like, oh, I don't even feel like I shouldn't say I don't even, I'm very honored to be in your ether. I see behind you, I'm going to wrap up because we've been here for a bit. I see behind you the Willy Wonka
Yes, sir.
poster that you have. And it's one of my favorite movies too. I know it meant a lot to you. And so you said something in your book. You were talking about it, and this was your quote. You said, I wrote about the importance of the gobstopper,
Mm.
how it was a test of decency and integrity, and how doing the right thing, even when it was hard, was the key to getting what you ultimately want. And I just found that so profound. It also made me appreciate a time that you gifted me as a gift, an everlasting gobstopper. And it was only when I read that in the book that I still keep it on my desk, but I appreciate that even more so. And I appreciate that you have made in and of itself for everyone as sort of their own personal gobstopper, so that they can witness your truth and witness, you know, your hard work and ultimately getting what you want in life. You're a pretty remarkable dude. So thanks for the gobstopper. But I just wanted to thank you for the time. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for taking the art of magic and elevating it into a conversation that allows people who love magic to be proud of it, and for people who don't love magic to love it. I think that you are one of a very few a group of people who do that and continue to do it. We can't wait to see what happens to you next. I will be there front and center. If you need me for anything, let me know. But thanks for the chat.
Well, thank you for everything.
Now go win an Emmy.
Okay.